That was an excerpt from a traditional English folk song called The Carter. What is it about this simple form of vernacular storytelling that is so effective? And how can it be used in actor training? Taking inspiration from the 1960s critics group who combined acting technique with folk singing, I set out to explore how folk songs can be used to great effect in training actors. I'm Johnny Black, and this podcast charts a series of 5 live teaching sessions. I carried these out with actors who had a range of singing experience. I wanted to find out if using a folk song could create a closer connection to acting technique, and in so doing, could this reduce the fear factor in non-singing actors? Also of interest was whether singing a contemporary folk song, reflecting current social and political issues, could offer the actor anything extra. To do this, I wrote a song based on the events in Bristol on June the 7th, 2020, when a statue of slave trader Edward Colston was toppled by protesters as part of the Black Lives Matter movement. First, let's hear the song. Born in 1636, a British merchant was his trade. Raised in Bristol, England, much wealth and fame was made. A statue made of bronze was placed up high to mark his name, then tossed into the Avon like the rubbish he became. Then tossed into the Avon like the rubbish he became. For 300 years or more, the city glorified its son. The name of Edward Colston, many evils had he done. With a rope around his neck, he was pulled down to the ground, then tossed into the Avon, where he sank without a sound. Then tossed into the Avon, where he sank without a sound. Being black is not a crime, shout the people at the place, where they kneel upon his neck and scrawl graffiti on his face. And to the water's edge they drag his statue to its doom, then tossed into the Avon, where they shout it's not too soon. Then tossed into the Avon, where they shout it's not too soon. History changed that day in June. A young black girl would take the place of a toppled white merchant whose name had fell from grace. If you take the matter in your hands, a victory can be won. Then tossed into the Avon goes Bristol's wealthy son. Then tossed into the Avon goes Bristol's wealthy son. Having sent the song and the lyrics out to the actors in advance, my first question was to find out how they felt about the song, if they could relate to the song, and also if they had any experience of singing folk songs.
I can relate to it. I mean, my stepfather is a black man. It's been a really troubling time, and obviously people want change and people want to fight for change, and that was a huge thing, you know, and especially when the statue was put up of the woman, that was so empowering. I sang a bit of this to them and they just started dancing. Like really enjoyed it. So they were like, oh yeah, I love this. And so I connect to it in the sense that it's just like one of those songs that you can repeat and it becomes like, even though for some people it may be classed as like a troubling subject, it brings the essence of what it's truly about.
I was pleased to hear that the narrative contained within my song was clearly connecting with the students. Another student had a slightly different take.
You'd have to come up with a person who would be able to sing this song. I mean, I know the story, and I'm as I'm reading it, as I'm looking at listening to it, I'm trying to think what is the mood of it, who is the person that's singing this, and I'm not sure. How do you fit into it? What part of you do you have to use to make it work?
The next stage of the session involved introducing dramatic techniques into the process. I began by asking the students if they had been there that day in Bristol, how would they have felt? What would have been their character perspective? And how could this possibly inform their vocal tone and delivery of the song?
If there was, for example, a similar conflict, with a guy that is intending something, and maybe this is a way of saying, yeah, but sooner or later it will be justice, and you know what, this happened. So I'm looking forward to seeing your statue just being pulled down. I see this as a happy song. I don't know if it was intended to be. I also imagine telling this to the black girl who took the play.
I also introduced the idea of applying Laban efforts to the voice and how this may affect the tone and delivery.
So probably with me, at the beginning could be like a gliding. In those bits, I'll tell you, it could be more like a pushing. It's like a protest, but like a positive protest for me.
Another student voice explained the application of Laban technique to the voice in this way.
It would be like, I feel like there would be a bit of a press in it. It's sort of like, it's that sort of air factor where it's like, I know it sounds strange, you're adding that grounded feeling of really pushing and driving forward, but it's also having that sense of air like uplifting you. You're standing your ground, you're singing what you believe in, but you're having a sense of this like togetherness, morale, the etc. that gives you that uplift, gives you that feeling of floatiness, that happiness, and sort of like, I'm not gonna tell you a story of woe and sad and I'm this and blah blah blah. We're telling you a story of like uplifting.
Bearing in mind that some of the actors may still be feeling nervous at this stage at the prospect of having to sing, I simply ask them to speak the words of the song, using the characterizations, the emotions, the Laban efforts and the actor questions that we've discussed, letting them inform the tone of their vocal delivery in a spoken manner. This is what happened.
Born in 1636, a British merchant was his trade. Raised in Bristol, England, much wealth and fame was made. A statue made of bronze was placed up high to mark his name, then tossed into the Avon like the rubbish he became. Then tossed into the Avon like a rubbish he became. For 300 years or more, a city glorified his son. The name of Edward Colston, many evils he had done. With a rope around his neck, he was pulled to the ground, then tossed into the Avon, where he sank without a sound. Then tossed into the Avon, where he sank without a sound.
The version you just heard was from the perspective of Edward Colston himself. This next version takes a different angle, from the protester's view.
Being black is not a crime, shout the people at the place, where they kneel upon his neck and scroll graffiti on his face. And to water's edge, they drag his statue to its doom, then toss into the Avon, where they shout, it's not too soon. Then toss into the Avon, where they shout, it's not too soon. History changed that day in June. A young black girl would take the place of a topple white merchant whose name had fell from grace. If you take the matter in your hands, a victory can be won. Then toss into the Avon goes Bristol's wealthy son. Then toss into the Avon goes Bristol's wealthy son.
And finally, I would ask the actors to sing through the whole song unaccompanied, using a speech-like quality to turn the speech into song, whilst maintaining the character perspective and everything that we'd worked on up until this point. To follow is a compilation of all of the actors singing the song through as a conclusion to what we'd worked on throughout the lesson.
Born in 1636, a British merchant was his trade. Raised in Bristol, England, much wealth and fame was made. A statue made of bronze was placed up high to mark his name, and tossed into the Avon like the rubbish he became. And tossed into the Avon like the rubbish he became.
For 300 years or more, a city glorified its son. The name of Edward Colston, many evils had he done. With a rope around his neck, he was pulled down to the ground, and tossed into the Avon, where he sank without a sound. Then tossed into the Avon, where he sank without a sound.
Being black is not a crime, shout the people at the place, where they knelt upon his neck and scrawled graffiti on his face. And to the water's edge they dragged his statue to its doom, then tossed into the Avon, where they shout it's not too soon. Then tossed into the Avon, where they shout it's not too soon.
History changed that day in June. A young black girl would take the place of a tall white merchant whose name had fell from grace. If you take the matter in your hands, a victory can be won. Then tossed into the Avon goes Bristol's wealthy son. Then tossed into the Avon goes Bristol's wealthy son.
At the end of the process, I was eager to ask the actors for their feedback. My first question was in regards to how they found the process of working on the song.
And so it's really interesting because you're like starting the lyrics with a historic date. So it's like, okay, someone was born in 1636, so I want to hear more about this guy. You did it in a way that it could be easily approachable for everyone because it's in a very comfortable range. So I think everyone could do it, even if they are like a little bit shy.
Where is it? Who are you singing it to? What is it about? Yeah, it just gives a course for actors to go on and find their way to connect that together. Yeah. And I think that's what relates with folk music. Like, even if you were like, oh, I want you to sing this in a style of like rock, people are going to be like, no, I can't, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, the same way like we promote as actor trainers this thing of just tell the story and what's your need and what's the story you want to tell. Why don't just promoting that also in relation to singing, lack of confidence when they're singing, it's about where do you put the focus. So rather than putting the focus on the technical aspect, that you can, like at some point you need to see the technical aspects, but then putting the focus on just telling a story. I imagine this approach as a first contact with a song. Yeah. Like somehow to unblock it, and then you can start looking at technical aspects, intention and story on top of that. So I will start with this as a way of unblock, like a first, just unblock. To also discover what are your first feelings and your first impression with the song. With this folk song, I think they can have the intention, but also a story. Like this song was a story. I'm telling you a story.
I was very encouraged to hear that the process of looking at actor intention and integrating acting methods before the singing seemed to be helping the actors. With a more nervous student, however, how did the folk song material help to reduce the fear factor?
I guess because I've got all the anger, I don't really care if I'm mess up and whatever, because that's the kind of emotional state of her. She's like, what the fuck are you doing? What, look, I'm all over the place. I'm like, what is happening? So it kind of helps me. The nerves add to it, I think. That is what I love. I love acting. I love emotion. And it's not an effort for me to put emotion into stuff. That's just who I am as an actress and a person, I guess. And so the fact that I could use it, the fact that I hate being technical. That's why I've avoided singing, because of the technique. You were letting me just do my own thing, and you're not pulling up, oh, that's wrong, because I don't know, it just closes me down. But I like the fact that this first session is just what you bring, you're giving me that freedom. I wouldn't be intimidated now, because I could work with that, because I don't, I'd just approach it as a monologue and then just get them to sing it afterwards. It's an approach to a singing lesson that, I never knew existed. I think if I was to go to a singing lesson where I knew that this is the material I'll be getting, and this is the the content I would be having in the tuition, I would actually be excited to go to those lessons. I'd be excited to go to those classes, the classes in drama school. I think it has everything. It's got everything. It's got the acting in. It's got, obviously, you're getting to practice the singing, and it's got movement in it as well. It's got an opportunity to put physicalisation into it. I used to get dead anxious about it, and And I don't have that kind of anxiety about it now.
And in terms of using a contemporary folk song, using current political themes, one of the actors shared his thoughts in this way.
I suppose the only difficulty is that if there's, they feel there's an orthodoxy they've got to join in. Because when you think about it, although these days I suppose people can only go to drama school if they can afford it. But that would probably support the idea that you're going to get some people turning up who vote Conservative. You're going to have people turn up who are in the students there, and if they're asked to find what their true feelings are about things, they will have been raised in racism and nationalism, or it certainly is not going to be. And the trouble is, if you write something according to what you think is what the youth are doing, there's an orthodoxy they feel they then have to pretend to be. The more it can, as you say, just tell the story about what happened and reflect that fact that that not just that this is a great thing because the statues come down, but actually you've put in the story he was a revered man and he gained wealth and he was loved by everybody, and then he's turned into the river. So I think it's good because it's a current issue, but I think the danger is that you might put an attitude to that current issue and force on them a kind of I think is what Bill Gaskell calls the new orthodoxy. What you have done is given just perhaps dispassionately, though it does look at the first instance as though it is more supportive of the pulling down of the statue. It gives room, I think, for people to think, well, is that good, or is it not good, or is there a bigger issue there that you can attach to, rather than just thinking you have to subscribe to everything that goes along with the event. I suppose we also, as educators, have to be careful about promulgating any kind of political view, which is your point, isn't it, really? So the actor gets engaged, and the actor is the person that your exercise is talking to.
Yes.
And maybe only later. So I think, therefore, it's a really useful. You've kind of made your point.
I found these teaching sessions extremely rewarding and enlightening. I was able to fully explore the practical applications of my research. They were designed as an introduction to singing, with limited focus on singing technique itself. I wanted the actors to engage with the acting methods first. By the end of the session, though, all the students were using pitch and melody, a great achievement. The lessons seemed to support my claim that integrating the dramatic methods used by the critics group into the process of learning to sing can reduce any anxiety and create a closer connection to the sung narrative. Introducing Stanislavski and Laban techniques at an early stage seemed to excite and inspire the actors beyond my expectations. The use of a contemporary folk song sparked lively debate, along with being able to create a range of character perspectives. My international actors embraced the themes within the story to great effect. From a personal point of view, it made me realise the potential of combining my practice as a voice teacher with my ability as a songwriter. Folk is a genre that is inherently communal and accessible. For actors, they offer a rich variety of song material and the opportunity to creatively develop their singing voices. In the words of one of the students, they have everything.